the roles are getting merged, right? So I think maybe the designer, the developer, the PM of future will all be called as just this one role uh, called a builder. After about 2 years of we being inside the age of AI cycle, I hope people have learned their lessons that you cannot have this strategy which is like multi-year strategy, no matter who you are, how big you are, right? By the time people come up with their AI strategy, people are asking agentic strategy. By the time people come up with their agentic strategy, now the latest question is, hey, what is your harness strategy, right? They may have taken a moral high ground, but one of the things that people don't realize is that every business is a privilege that society grants it. And a government is a proxy of that society. I gave it that, it might have the principal agent problem. It may not be the best proxy of the society, but, it's a proxy that it is the extending, the hand to the business. And you need to figure out a way to actually work with the government.
Hello, Rajan. What's brewing?
Hey, Kashi, back on our show.
Yeah,
We
looks like
both
both
ditched
of
our
us.
jackets.
Yeah, the summer is hitting Bangalore. So I guess jackets are hard to wear. And then, yeah, that's pretty interesting. So before we start our episode, I think we got a lot of requests for us to cover 5 distinct items. I think the number one request was impact of AI on jobs. I think we're going to cover that. And the 4 other things that really
Did
came up.
you,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
on impact of jobs, did you see that Lenny Rachitsky tweet? He put out a tweet saying AI native product managers, and he got like 75,000 applications.
Oh my
Wow.
God. People really seem to be hungry to scale up. I think that's really a big, big signal. And I think one of the things I'm really seeing, I have a lot of examples to cover that, but we'll also want to cover a couple of more items. Maybe that's the first topic we want to cover a little more in detail. There was one request on how do people use Perplexity Computer, Cloud Remote, and what's the impact really on the workforce. And then it was all about requesting on what does agent autonomy really mean. Again, leaning to the same topic, people are really beginning to understand how it impacts the workplace. So probably we'll cover all this in the podcast today, and we'll start rolling. On that note,
Yeah,
we'll
let's
go
jump
back.
into it.
Yeah. On that note, let me go back to the first point you made, right? What was Lenny Reddit's post all about? And we saw 75,000 people enroll. What's really happening? What
So
psychology is happening there?
yeah, I think one, we've talked about it before. What is happening is that the roles are getting merged. A designer is a product manager. A product manager is a developer. A developer is a designer, right? So there is a lot of overlap that is happening. I was speaking to a founder 2 days ago, and he said his designer was still using Figma, and he had to actually sort of move him aside and said, "Look, I'm going to use Cursor, the ID, and I'm going to do much better design using Cursor rather than just sort of getting stuck in old kind of tools." So because of this, what is happening is that the roles are getting merged, right? So I think maybe the designer, the developer, the PM of future will all be called as just this one role uh, called a builder, right? And my own take on this is that maybe there are about 45 million developers that are there. Maybe there are 20 million product managers that are there. Maybe there are 10, 15 million designers that are there. So you will see 45 plus 20 plus 15, which we are talking about 60 plus 20, 80, right? About 80 million of all these folks will become like 10 million builders, and the rest of the 70 million have to figure out like what is it that they're doing, and some of them will become like solo founders, yeah, solopreneur. Or I'm also hearing this new term called agentpreneur, right? So they will use agents and then sort of build solo business. Maybe 10 million builders are hired by other companies, and then there are like another 10 million. So these 60 million people will have to figure out what to do next. And I guess that is what is leading to this this penchant demand on Okay, how do I upgrade? How do I build? How do I become a builder? How do I become a solopreneur? Right? If not, like, what does future look like for me? Right? So this is the psychology that is underpinning this. So crazy, right? Who finds like 75,000 people for a workshop? I get it. He is popular, and Lenny's podcast is perhaps the most popular product management podcast in the world. But yeah, I've never seen this number.
I think on this topic, I want to bring back the Anderson Horowitz article, which they published quite some time ago, around December 2025. They ask a simple question. Agents start to make an impact on your organization structure. And this was like the chart that came up. We are starting to hire agents instead of people. And this was a poll. As you can see, the chart started to indicate that there was a shift in the way organizations are thinking about how they create their workforce, and that started to shift. Now, we are seeing that impact on the ground. We saw what Akash did with a very lean team. He refactored the code. We are still in the software development space. We are seeing this happening in finance. We are seeing this happen in HR. So I'll just start to share a story. I was talking to one of the top CHROs of India, of a very publicly listed company, and he shared um, a very interesting insight. If they open a job post, they were getting like thousands of resumes. Of course, they have their ATS engines and so all that. But a lot of it, they also sort it like they get to Google Drive, look through it, and then ship it. One of his intern did something very interesting. She let the agent do
Mhm.
all of it, saying that, hey, go find out, go find, create an Excel, sort it out, find the skills, and just map it, and you go shortlist it. And it did it. And he was blown. And that really begged the question that
Mm.
how it is going to start changing the way people think of work and how powerful impact it's going to have on the design of an organization. So I think agents are coming to workforce. They are already here, and very smart people are
Yeah, Kashi.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So my take on this, I think I've been saying this for a few days now, that future of work is human plus agents. Most of us is still thinking that future of work is this digital transformation. This is like, the pre-age of AI. I mean, in the age of AI, future of work is human plus agents, right? In fact, I have like a revised version of this. I feel that future of work is human plus claws. Claws are these open claw based agents, which I think are going to be considered as like, their own version of a little bit of a super agent, right? So you're going to have teams where there is one person, then there are like four claws, and they are working together, and then they're doing the work of like 20 people. That is like, going to happen faster than most people imagine. I don't know if you saw that tweet from Swix, which I also sort of retweeted, where he said, I mean, around the announcement of this $110 billion from OpenAI, they snuck out a small fact which said that, in the last quarter, or like, in the last few days, 600K new developers got added. So that means like 1.6 million developers that are there. Like in like, a very short span of time, that's like a 3x growth. This is like exponential. This is like, mass migration from like, old way of doing things to new way of doing things. By Q2 2026, most CTOs will be actually spending time on saying, hey, how do I help these new type of developers who are actually figuring out how to run these agents, and how to orchestrate, and how to actually run harness and things like that. So the future of work in terms of agents plus human is like, it is coming faster than most of us imagine. Of course, most people will say, think this doesn't work, that doesn't work. Those are all melting ice problems.
Absolutely. I think I see one company seeing this very early on and researching about it. And I would say that that's been Anthropic. So, as going back to the report they published a couple of weeks ago, it was on India's AI or adoption index on brief economic index. I saw something interesting at that point in time, and ever since I've been following, which is AI autonomy. Um, and this
Yeah.
really asks a question, right? Not only for the organization, even for the individuals, how soon can you figure out AI autonomy, be it in form of clause, like how you speak, one human plus multiple clause, or one human plus multiple agents, or one human plus multiple computers. Uh, and to really push the boundary of economic productivity is going to be the way in which future of work and future of organizations are going to be designed. Um, if that is the case,
Absolutely.
I want to ask one question, right? This looks like a societal scale impact. If that is the case, what would happen to jobs? What would happen to people? And who are the people who are? How does one actually deal with this change in such a rapidly changing era?
So my take on this is that yeah, like the numbers that I shared, there is definitely going to be a lot of change that is going to happen. See, fundamentally, I'll first tell you this, Kashi. Like, I'm a optimist at heart, right? Like, I believe that at least at a humanity level, right, we figured things out, right? When COVID could not shake us from a human society perspective, we'll find a way to survive and thrive. I mean, I give it that the age AI that is there is like it's the exponential rate that it's far superior than the average human intelligence that is there. But despite that, I think I'm very optimistic about the human society will find a way to survive and thrive. But at the individual level, there is going to be like a lot of pain. I mean, my father, the place that he comes from, there is a lot of weavers there, right? And when these hand weavers actually were impacted by industrial loom, then it was their kids who had to actually move to the cities, and that's how the family was able to sort of migrate the difficulty that they had when they were first hit by the disruption. So there is going to be a lot of individual pain that may happen as these roles changes, as these jobs changes. But as a collective society, I think we will be far better off. I'm also like a big believer on Jevons paradox. More calculator came, the roles changed, but we didn't remove accountants. More spreadsheets came, we didn't remove accountants. Right, there are more accountants that are working on finance related work than there was before. So come I like given I will combine Jevons paradox and my optimistic view about the world, and then say, hey, we will figure things out. But that also means that uh, there is this pressure that everybody has to upscale, right? The 15-year-old experienced person is the one that is going to find this the hardest, because the 30-year experienced people have seen multiple platform shifts, not as big as this one. They've seen platform shift, and then the 3 to 4 year olds, they have not seen any platform shift, so they may be able to upskill themselves much better. So there is going to be some impact, but then how people are going to sort of deal with that is really the question, right? So invest in tinkering, figuring out like if there is perplexity computer or if there is Claude Cova, go learn that. That is like learning the new. It's like learning the Excel, right? Like 20 years ago, like how people will go to computer shops and learn Excel. So that's now the perplexity computer and Claude Cova. So if you're like an engineer, then you invest in Claude code itself, right? So and then learn how this whole agentic harness and all things is gonna work. So it is gonna cause a lot of chaos, but then it is up to all the individuals to say, hey, how do I invest in it, and then how do I stay 2 steps ahead. 2 steps ahead. That's all I think we can do. You don't want to be like 10 steps ahead, but you don't want to just sort of sit around and then say, hey, when it is going to be the last person that has to be trained, then I will show up, right? So I think you should not have that mindset.
Well,
Your take, Kash. This.
um, I will add to what you said. It's not divergent. I'm also not optimistic about this space, but I think I see three trends. The number one, if I'm probably a good developer or a great developer, I suddenly find I'm probably in a space where all my competition is wiped out. Because one, I am ahead, I have depth in the knowledge. So in short, people who really have deep technical skills, where what we call as elemental foundational knowledge, are going to become super, super important. The reason I say this is because if we need to validate the outcome of an agent today, those evals and those benchmarks have to be written by human. Of course, there are synthetic evals and benchmarks, but we are setting the way for the agent. So second one, so we talked about top performance.
Correct.
We go to the next layer, right, which is the rest of the crowd, right? I think one of the greatest opportunity I see in this area is people who have ability to diversify the kind of work they do. Uh, if you really look at it the way Akash spoke, right? We created artificial roles as DevOps and security engineers and so on and so forth. So now I see that a lot of generalists who have ability to actually work on multiple areas like design, coding, probably marketing, sales. I think a lot of productivity will get unleashed, which will drive positive economic impact. I think I see that. The third thing I see is a different challenge, which is people are scaling themselves. Right? Our organization scaling themselves. I think this is a totally different paradigm. The reason I am bringing that is like when sometimes we go, we don't want to name it, go speak to a Fortune 500 company when Sam Altman did. We see three patterns happening. One, they create saying that, hey, by 27, we have the 2026 is all about AI education. 27 is about AI deployment. I think people are changing. The question really becomes, are organization changing? The second paradigm you see within the organization is, okay, now that AI is here, like let's say we have adopted it, to make a decision, we go through procurement and you see what the conversation we tend to have, right? Oh, let my procurement approve. Oh no, like CEO's vision is like I want it yesterday, and the organization culture, I think, is not yet ready for that. The third one is like probably the biggest change. Like often people are planning 3 or 5 year roadmaps, and the rate of technology change does not help them strategize um, for that long term as of yet. So I feel that when we talk about uh, when we combine all these factors, I think opportunity lies in multiple layers for humans to optimize outcomes. And I don't think that it will have a negative impact. In fact, it will be the same impact that digitization dish to all our forms. You go fill an unnecessary form and then just drop it in there just because you have to do it. I think a lot of things will go away. On this note, I'm going to ask you a question.
I think 2 years
Yeah.
in. Yeah. So just one point, right? On this thing about like, the pace of change and then 3 years roadmap. After about 2 years of we being inside the age of AI cycle, I hope people have learned their lessons that you cannot have this strategy which is like multi-year strategy, no matter who you are, how big you are, right? Like by the time people come up with their AI strategy, people are asking agentic strategy. By the time people come up with their agentic strategy, now the latest question is, hey, what is your harness strategy, right? So so you can't do 2 3 years of road mapping. You have to be nimble. You have to act like, and scaling law says that every 6 months you're like going to see like a reset of the environment, because like the other assumptions around intelligence is going to be different. I'd assume cost falls by 1/10 and then performance improves by 30%. So anything that you're going to plan beyond 6 months is going to be like a pool, right? And the funny thing that I say about the 6 months is we don't know when the 6 months start and when it ends. And all this agentic discussion that we are talking about, something around December had happened, right? And after that, people are like recognizing, oh my god, like what is going on with this agentic coding, right? Why is it like one shotting? Like there are a lot of issues with agent harness, but then people are able to see, oh, if I just sort of work with like guide the agents really well, then I'm able to sort of build my applications really really well, right? So whether it is like Karpati building GPT nanos, or whether it is somebody who's building like an enterprise application, or like any other toy application, right? So the pace is so high. At least the last 2 years of experience, I hope it like gives the right lesson for everyone, saying that no 2 year roadmap.
Yeah. I think I'm going to ask one important question, right? Um, One biggest dam breaking moment in last few months has happened as OpenClaw. It has existed in multiple forms before. You call it cloud remote computer, now Perplexity desktop. So if I'm a CTO, CISO, or somebody else, I can see one biggest workforce paradigm change. One is like, hey, employee, I did it myself recently yesterday when my computer uh, crashed and the screen broke and I had to operate something on it. I gave cloud remote control. Luckily, the cloud remote control session was running. I just gave it an instruction to complete the work, and despite screen being broken, the screenless software took over and it did the job and it let me accomplish my work. But that also put me in a state of scare. If someone who's not at their desk is now operating outcomes for an organization, you need to get ready for it. So how should a CTO, CIO, or like anyone at a strategic level think? They cannot destroy our AI autonomy because there's a path they need to walk on. But what is the strategy that they need to put in place such that they move forward?
So before I talk about the CTO, right? So the whole Claude remote is at least help me unglue from my screen.
Absolutely.
Which is what
Yeah.
you're, which was like a case of you having to be done because you're forced to do it because your
Yeah.
screen broke. But then finally I was able to actually step away from a screen and then still see that I'm able to connect to my local machine and then fire up few commands. Otherwise I'll always be thinking, oh man, I'm not in front of my screen. So that way it has really unchained and untethered from the desk, right? So it's fantastic. um, from a CTO perspective, so there are a couple of things that are happening. One is, I think maybe somebody who's shared this stat, right? In 2025, at least one new frontier model released every 18 days, right? Which means that, and now it is the continuing to happen in 2026. We talked about it in a couple of our episodes, right? Kimi and GLM and things like that. So model layer has become commodity, and no more are people making choices on saying, hey, it is Opus 4.5 or Gemini 3.1 and things like that. So the model layer is commodity. The two more layer that I think a CTO has to think about is his harness and context. Context saying, hey, how do I actually build my Claude.md? How do I actually manage my context? I mean, especially if it is very, very limited. I'm working on agents which are having limited context window, and I don't want to sort of fill it more than 40%. So how do I actually suggest how to manage that? But harness in terms of what is the tool calling, what is the system prompts, and how do I run that, and in what sequence that I run that, right? How do I actually have my memory? So that harness, which we often use as an analogy, saying if model is your engine, harness is your chassis in the car. So how do you actually design that is something that the CTOs will have to pay attention on, because that is where the differentiation is coming. That is where your core competence is coming, and that is where you actually have to protect your core competence that we have talked about in the past, right? So three layers: model, which is commodity, swappable. Maybe you actually make choices on it based on the cost, latency, etc. Then you actually say that this is how my harness is going to look like. You actually design, you experimented, and then you have come up with saying that this is how I'm going to sort of guide the rest of the teams and the organization to sort of use it. And then how do I actually manage my context? Those are the three things that I would say that becomes important from a CTO perspective. See, the OpenClaw thing is slightly different. OpenClaw is a CISO's worst nightmare.
So
OpenClaw
is the
became
cloud
successful
remote
because
control.
it was a CISO.
Uh, Cloud remote control is even more scary than OpenClaw. I realized that.
Why do you say that?
Um, I think probably you'll have to go into a bit of personal experience that I went through yesterday. I have a MacBook Pro in which I run a lot of programs, and for some reason it fell down and the screen went away. I had started a remote session because I wanted to take a break. So we had to upload like YouTube video, and we had to run our experiments. I could control
Hmm.
functions that I couldn't imagine programmatically. Um,
Like what?
I got
Like what?
stuff out of my browser which I wouldn't have been otherwise be able to do. The playwright was running, and then I just
So you asked. Yeah, you asked Claude Code saying that open my
No, the
browser.
browser
Is
was
it what you
already
did from
running.
your phone?
So I asked Cloud Code to do actions on my browser, saying that, hey, you create a program to do this and test this on my browser. And it literally figured it out how to do that. And I'm like, I mean, of course, I use mCloud, Playwright, MCP, etc. So I had a clever way of giving it instruction to make it do things which otherwise I wouldn't have done it myself. So that really got me thinking on what era are we getting into? Because it could deploy even to the site that we were building. It went and deployed into Vercel, it went and deployed into GCP, and it got information. And I am not even there to authorize many of those transactions or even take a look at it, which I was like the first most skeptic to even do it in the first.
It's like a Trojan
Yeah,
horse,
it's like, I mean, you don't know whether the employees are there. So I think coming back to the point, right? AI autonomy was great. It helped us move forward, but it also is scarier, which means
Scary as
we
well.
need to do three things, right? One, we need to come up with a strategy and a policy as to who can use it and who cannot use it. Two, what kind of levers and controls we start building and then start working around it. So that's where the point that you are trying to make, actually, people have, I want to expand on what does harness really mean. Um, there's a question from the audience saying that, hey, Rajan and Kashi are only promoting on-prem AI. Are you not like promoting, like, are you going near the model companies? No, I think that's where we want to like segregate. We are promoting organizational autonomy, says that none of these model companies swallow your business. That's number one. The second, what we are promoting really is that you have to protect your own IP and to protect your own work, uh, use a hybrid strategy. A part of, like, say, you're building a CRM or there's some part of the work you want to do in Excel, is absolutely fine. Go use Anthropic or like, I mean, some function like customer service, use OpenAI, like choose the model of your choice and build it. But if you are doing core design, use build your own harness, own your own harness, own your intelligence, and own your DSP. And that's where I think to do that, you require a harness because when that evolves, I think the probability that you will have a little more control over your outcomes sort of increase. On that note, I want to move us
Yeah.
to something that's interesting that's happening. I was waiting for DeepSeek to be launched, and I am starting to get the first glimpse of the paper. This was a beautiful paper that was published. DualPath, breaking the bandwidth bottleneck for agentic LLM. So, like to simplify, I think what they are trying to do is nothing but focus on KV cache, like the way it is loaded and optimized. Um, and it actually accelerates the rate at which inference really happens. The point that really got me excited was that dual path involves offline inference to improves offline inference by 1.87 times in the in-house system and online inference throughput by 1.96 systems. So Rajan, before I share my views, I want you to say what does it really mean? Because you are an inference expert. What is the strategic implication for a CTO, CXO, or somebody else who's working in the model area?
So, one of the thing that was like a big takeaway for me from this was that most of the people, in terms of, so there is this idea of a workload, right? We've seen this in the past. The workload, like when it is the AI application, I think they are like different shapes. Most of the applications that are there out there today is either it is a chat shaped workload, which is small bursts, and then you're getting responses, or you're going to have like a coding type of a workload where it is going to be you're asking one question about developing a certain set of functions, and then you're appending some code that has already been there. So these are the workloads that are there. But when you're going to have workloads which involves like multi-turn, long context windows, and then there are going to be tool calling and things like that, the shape of this workload is going to be completely different from the workloads that are predominant right now. So the dual path, at least approach, is highlighting that the agentic workload is going to be very different, and most of the infra that is set up today, you don't it is not optimized for it. Now people who actually run their own inference get it, but like those who don't run inference and they're working on like rented intelligence platforms, APIs like OpenAI and Claude APIs, you will witness that through either latency, or you will witness that through rate limits. You will not know like why you are hitting more rate limits and why you are having these issues with respect to latencies, is because like the inference stack that you have is not optimized or like tuned for an agentic workload. And the architecture that these guys were suggesting is like acknowledging that, and then saying, hey, how do I actually shape the inference stack so that I'm ready for a agentic workload. That I think is the biggest highlight of this paper. I know you will dive into the technicals part of it, so love to hear your
I
take
did
on it.
not go through the paper enough to deep commentary, but what I would say is that I saw two trends. If I was a CTO or like a procurement manager, I see that the cost of the model per outcome that we're going to achieve is going to decrease. Adding on to what you said, I was more focused on use case basis. I strongly believe agent economy is coming, and the shape of agent economy is going to be far different than the shape of human economy that we have seen till date, which implies that the way we do inference for agent economy, just adding to what you said, is going to be very, very different. The application design is going to be different. The interaction patterns are going to be different. The way agents will monetize on your behalf of your organization are going to be different. So strategic input implication for a CXO is that, hey, how are you getting your organization ready for agent economy? Uh, it's going to be the next dam breaking moment. It's already happened. We are about 6 months away when we are going to see new inflection points that are going to be induced due to it. So what are you doing? And that's an angle in which I'm sort of investigating, and that's probably the topic that we're going to cover more in the next podcast. Probably I'll go to the last one. This is probably on a
Yeah.
lighter note. Did you see what NVIDIA is doing? I was like, I found them very sneaky, silently introducing models. Yeah, I just,
Yeah, I mean, Kashi, this one I know you shared it with me.
oh
Why
yeah.
don't you actually share this one and
Oh
then
yeah, I love your
follow on?
commentary on this. But NVIDIA slowly started releasing additional models. Of course, it had Nematron and other ones. But now I see that they have released Nematron Terminal. I see what's happening. And what was interesting to me was Nematron Terminal synthetic tasks. So I think this had not caught my eye before. So this is something I'm seeing for the first time. Um, the question on this is not what NVIDIA did, which is absolutely fine, great. Why is there a craze for terminal, which was supposed to be dead, increasing in 2026?
Yeah, I think this question has been there for like the last, I would say, couple of months. Most people are actually shocked by why Cloud Code did well, right?
Mm.
And why Terminal Bench, right? So I don't know whether it was you or someone else who had actually shared a paper which talked about saying, while like we're all happy just like creating a screenshot and then giving that to like a multimodal model, the effectiveness of that is at least 20% less than the text that is there. And like even today, the models that are out there, like the text-based models are a lot more effective. And if I were to take that insight forward, then I would say the coding agents were like, or coding co-pilots that were there that were not depending on vision-based or like image-based inputs. They did far better. And when you use a text terminal, like you are constraining yourselves to that. I would say that one, and then also another thing that I would say is like this video that I watched from Ilyas Sutskever, where he said, I don't remember what was the specific number he used, but he said, uh, if you stack up all the languages, all the words that are there, it is still going to be like less than few trillion dollar, few trillion, right? All the language. And he said that if we can understand everything that is there in language, then that is good enough for us to actually deal with everything that a human is dealing with. I know Feifei Lee has an opposite view, and then she's talking about world models and things like that. She says that nature exists, nature doesn't have language, language is a human construct. But this comment from Elias Utskever was very interesting. He said that, but everything is then interpreted by the human, right? So the intelligence is interpreted by the human. So it's not like what is existing out there. And he said that, language, if we understand language, it is enough to understand human. Like in that sense, if I know how somebody writes, that is good enough to know that how somebody thinks. There is this term called writing is thinking, right? So if I can just like look at a bunch of articles that some people had written, then I know like what are his mental models. So text, therefore, I feel is far more powerful to just get to like a sense of what intelligence, right? Which is why I think the text based coding models are doing well, and terminals are still like important, while many people think it is visual that is
I
a lot more
definitely
richer.
agree. I think 2026 probably has been the year of rebirth of the terminal in some way, but I expected it to go in a different direction, saying that terminal need not have been designed for humans in the first place. Probably could have been designed for agents in the first place, and probably liking to the construct could be different. But I think that's a debate for another day. Some movie, yeah,
That is why Peter talks about saying, all I want is CLI. In
yeah,
fact, he's not a big fan of MCDs at all. He is a big fan of CLI. So anything that he wants to get done, he'd be like, look, either an API is there, great, I'll use it. Otherwise, like I'll go build a CLI, give it to the agent. Agent will run CLI, right? And get like, give text input, and then, get text output, right? So
absolutely.
yeah, there you go.
Um, I'm smelling something different, and that's the next topic we are going into. Um, I see that this is coming from the paper that uh, Anthropic published. It's called um, the persona selection model. There was another. There was another called
Oh
Gems
yeah.
by Google, which was all again something around a similar line, slightly different, wherein you can build a career coach or an agent for yourself. Again, it's sort of a persona-driven thing. Um, so I wanted to spark, right? I think this came, yeah, this came a
Talk a
little
little
bit
bit.
before, but what do you think will be the strategic impact on products? You talked about emotion and AI last time. So what do you think is happening? Why is there a re-spark of interest in this? We initially created roles and then become prompts, etc. Like what's happening? What do you see think is changing?
Yeah, I think for me, the gem part is a slightly different from the anthropic part, even though it look very similar because there is about emotion, roles, and things like that. Gems, at least I thought was it was basically trying to make a declaration that the prompt layer is commoditized, right? In the sense that OpenAI came up with GPT and it said, look, can we actually package all the GPT together to create like an application type of a view, more like an app store? And same thing Claude had with respect to projects. Can we actually punch a set of instructions and then prompt to actually do something repeatable? So gems to me, it felt like that. And interesting thing is that even though prompts is still a new field, we are actually talking about it in the sense of saying, hey, it may be commoditized. I don't believe that. I mean, I've been working on helping build like prompt based application. Just getting the prompt right it's an art of its own, but that is the direction gems is taking. What to me is interesting about the anthropic paper is that it is about giving role, and reading that post at least made me feel that post training is almost like trying to give like a training to a human or a child of saying what will you become, right? In the sense that
Rajan, before we part, I want to ask a very important question, which is all over the internet. AI in the age of war, like it should have been the age of AI, but it's becoming the age of war. We see two things that happen. In India, Supabase got banned. Anthropic went through all the drama with the US government. We also wrote a LinkedIn blog post on it. What do you think is the impact on enterprise than from a societal standpoint? What happened? What did Anthropic get
So
it
I will
right, and
talk
what
about the
happened?
Anthropic one. Superbase,
Yeah.
I'd love for you to chime in. So Anthropic, I thought it was one of the biggest strategic blunder that they made in working with, the U.S. government. They may have taken a moral high ground, but one of the things that people don't realize is that every business is a privilege that society grants it, and a government is a proxy of that society. I gave it that, it might have the principal agent problem. It may not be the best proxy of the society, but, it's a proxy that it is the extending, the hand to the business. And you need to figure out a way to actually work with the government. You cannot say that, oh, I'm going to take a stand. It is I saw this friend of mine who put out a great comment on that post, and he said it is like the game of Go. Sometimes you have to actually, ignore a area of battle so that you can actually go win the war. If you actually go and then say I'm going to be stuck on this, and I'm going to just be hell-bent on this, I'm going to disagree with the rules of the game, and if you get thrown out of the game, then there is no way you can win the game. And this has happened in history, right? People thought that AT&T's Bell Labs was like unshakable. It was the fountain of where Nobel Prize winners used to actually come out. But then, today's generation doesn't know about AT&T or doesn't know about Bell Labs, right? Similar thing happened with many other tech companies. So I think you need to figure out a way to actually first survive, and then you can actually say that this is areas where I do trade-offs, essentially, right? So I know I got a lot of flack for saying no, they stood their ground. This is moralistic. It was great of them, and at the end of the day, time only remembers what survives, right? And you have to survive to actually then go make that impact. In fact, people don't think about the second order effects of this. So I would say that second order effect is I actually talked about it from an anthropic perspective, but your question is more from an enterprise perspective, right? I at least for me, the takeaway is that, look, if anthropic is going to the US government and then saying that we will not budge, then you might be $100 billion enterprise. Anthropic is want to do the same thing. This is the most consequential technology of our lifetime, right? But then when you're going to actually have conversation with someone who feels that they have like full control over that, then it'll become like a ego battle, right? So, and if it is, and we've been saying that all this type of technology that actually touches your core competency should be actually within your premises, which means that this only tells me that there is more case to be made that enterprises have to own your own models, own your own harnesses, so that you don't lock yourself into a negotiation like this, right? And I'm pretty sure enterprises would want to be in the position where the government of US is today, where they're like, look, if you're not going to agree with us, then we'll find another path and move forward, right? So that is the enterprise implication. So you please do an audit of what are all the most consequential parts that are there inside your supply chain, where the vendor can come and say, no, I'm not going to agree with you, right? And I guess with Superbase, this is where you are going. What do you think has happened in Superbase? I really didn't get it, right? Why did it get caught? I saw the one of the VP engineering or like a founder at Superbase write to the IT minister on Twitter, but there was no response. What did happen there?
It's pretty bit unclear to me. All I know is they only deploy on AWS data centers. Maybe it's to do with data privacy laws, or it could be anything. But the way I read this is like the point that you made, right? What are the strategic choke points for your organization? And people till now have been talking about owning the models, and we are taking them a step further, right? Owning your harness. And the harness can come in many shapes and forms. Could be programs which are orchestrating it, could be cloud cowork. You just rolled out a large cowork, or like could be perplexity, it could be anything, right? So what is your strategy that's in place is that your critical functions are run on your harness, and probably some so that either if the model is lost or if the harness is lost or like being denied access to, you have a plan B. Again, we are not saying for everything, but just for the few critical components. Let's say banking, your core accounting, you forget letting be even, don't even let them anywhere in the vicinity of your core IP. So I think and that's what Larry Ellison also is propagating, right? Hey, you have your proprietary data. Don't let anybody come even sniff what's there in it. So that's a theory that we tend to believe, and we tend to support organizations which tend to do that.
Yeah.
Probably on that.
So
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Kashi, let's do our customary three things. What is one tool, one question, one paper for this episode?
I would say perplexity computer. It seems to be interesting. It has to be a different approach than a cloud core or a clawbot that is being taken. So that's the one I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
19 models I hear they are orchestrating, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane. So I've got it installed. So I'm going to play around with it. That's one. One paper is a paper by DeepSeek we just spoke about, right? Uh, so I think that's a very interesting paper. I think we need to dwell into it. I think how they are using DualPath to load KV cache, and I think that's a very interesting paper. I think it has a strategic impact on the speed and inference. The one question to ask is what we asked at the beginning of the episode: AI autonomy. What are the experiments you're going to run in order to ensure that your organization employees can embrace autonomy in a safe and meaningful manner? I think it's not a question that can be postponed even for a day. But we are probably recording this on a Sunday, the episode should be out on Monday. But the moment you hear it, I think it's a very important question to ask. Rajan and I are happy to help, and we do counsel a lot of people. So uh, just drop us a note on LinkedIn or drop us a note on YouTube. We're happy to chat with you. On that note, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you all for your questions. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see you in another episode.
See you all. Bye bye.
Got a hot take on AI? A burning question? Let us know what you'd like us to debate next. And hey, if you want to jump in the ring with us, drop your LinkedIn link and the topic you're itching to discuss. We'd love to have you on the show.